If you're in the mood for dark and scary with a touch of irony, there's nothing better than to sit back and watch your favorite stories on the big screen or even the little screen. Today, we're going to talk about Netflix's Fall of the House of Usher by Mike Flanagan. But how does it compare to the original stories it represents? What are the Easter eggs? Let's look at each episode by title and see how it shapes up to the story written by the master of macabre himself, Edgar Allan Poe.
But you seemed happily married when I met you.
I was.
What went wrong?
Doesn't matter now.
That when it started? New Year's 1980, you're not at home with Annabelle Lee, you're locking lips with some other woman at a bar.
Had to.
Why?
I'll get to that.
What did you do, Roderick? You and Madeline. You said this is your confession. Confess.
Episode 4 is titled The Telltale Heart. In this episode, we begin a flashback of New Year's Eve, 1979. A night that sealed the fate of both Madeline and Roderick Usher. They did something bad, although we don't know what or how bad it was. At least, not yet. The first shot is Roderick staring at a stuffed raven just atop the bar. Verna stops by to talk to him, and Roderick tells her that ravens are bad omens, foreshadowing the inevitability that awaits their story. Verna tells Roderick the contrary, that ravens can bring good fortune. In a way, they're both right. Fortune awaits, as well as consequences for their wrongdoings. As Madeline sits down at the bar, it's her turn for a fortune-telling session with Verna. Verna tells her that she is a queen, alluding to ancient Egypt. She even calls her Cleopatra, most likely a reference to Poe's comedy Some Words with the Mummy, a tale poking fun at the Victorian-era fascination with Egyptology. Madeline tells Verna that she wants to live forever, independent of a man. As the new year rings in, fate sets a course of both prosperity and tragedy for the Usher twins and their extended family. There are lots of Easter eggs in here related to Poe, beginning with the first shot of a raven, a parallel to the bird prophet of Poe's famous poem, who sat just above a door frame, looking downward on the narrator. Just next to the bird is a ship in a bottle, another nod to one of Poe's first stories, MS Found in a Bottle. At the funeral service, Poe's poem Spirits of the Dead is being read by the priest, played by none other than Poe's scholar Mark Redfield. Sitting in the pews are the remaining Usher children. Tamerlane, Roderick's second child, has a gold bug pin on her hat. The gold bug is one of Poe's most successful short stories, one of the few that granted him financial success in his lifetime. While having a discussion with Madeline Usher, Rufus Griswold reveals that the Usher twins are the children of the company's founder, whose name happens to be Longfellow. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was a poet and rival to Poe. Poe greatly disliked him and felt that he was only successful because he came from money and lacked any real talent. During an argument with Victorine's partner, we can hear the song Total Eclipse of the Heart playing in the background, a foreshadowing of events to come and also reminding us that the episode is titled The Telltale Heart. Later on, another song, Hard on the Heart, is playing during a discussion between Victorine and her father Roderick. The judge in the Usher trial is named John Neal. John Neal was an editor and literary critic who gave Poe his first critical recognition. He wrote in the Yankee and Boston Literary Gazette in 1829 that E.A. Poe, despite his shortcomings, might make a beautiful and magnificent poem. Neal later said that Poe was a fellow of fine genius. These words of encouragement were what a very young Poe needed to launch his literary career. The Telltale Heart was published in January of 1843 in The Pioneer, a new magazine that was willing to take a chance on a dark horror story. Poe had tried to get the story published elsewhere, but was told the story should be more quiet. The tale begins with an unnamed narrator who is the caretaker of an old man. The narrator loves the old man except for one thing, his eye. Most likely a cataract, the narrator sees it as an evil eye, a sign of a demon from hell. The eye is separate from the old man, and unfortunately for him, the narrator decides that the old man must die in order to rid the world of his evil eye. A patient and meticulous plan is required, one the narrator is more than willing to carry out in order to unburden the dark and observing presence of the eye that watches.
Mr. Dupin insinuated early on that there was an informant close to the family, and since then, we believe the family is under attack.
I was told these deaths were accidental.
We are still investigating, Your Honor, but a continuance is warranted and needed in this case.
I wouldn't have thought counsel would be this opportunistic, but I suppose I'm not surprised.
Just what is he implying?
3 dead bodies in a week, Mr. Dupin.
And until we know why this happened and how it's related to Mr. Dupin's informant...
I'm sorry, who said it's related?
How can we know it isn't? You won't disclose.
For their safety.
Continuance isn't the end of the world, Mr. Dupin.
With the loss of Leo, suspicion of foul play arises. Leo was the third youngest child, killed in the pattern of youngest to oldest. The family is concerned about the informant that Dupin has bragged about. Given the circumstances, they want to delay the trial in order to investigate the connection of the murders to the mysterious and anonymous informant that is betraying the Usher family. During their present-day conversation, Dupin reveals that there was never an informant. It was a trick to get to the family. Roderick is impressed with Dupin's tactics, although they were unsuccessful. In the midst of their arguing, Roderick hears a heart beating along with bloodstains on Dupin's shirt.
Why, if it weren't for you, they would all still be alive today.
A foreshadowing similar to Poe's Telltale Heart, where the narrator can hear the heartbeat of the old man both before and after he is murdered. As Pym, the family attorney, investigates the murders, he notices a common denominator, Verna. Just before each death, she appears. Madeline and Roderick give their marching orders to find her at all costs. Madeline recognizes her face from the bar 43 years ago on that fateful New Year's Eve celebration. Now, Verna is with Victorine. The name Victorine is the name of a character in one of Poe's stories, The Premature Burial. In his tale, she is accidentally buried alive by her lover. She was eventually rescued by him, and the two ran away together. Verna and Victorine are discussing surgically implanting the heart device into Verna, who's posing as a patient. During their discussion, Victorine is distracted by the sound of a heartbeat, much like in Poe's tale, where the narrator at times can hear nothing but the sound of the old man's heart. In Poe's story, the narrator plots to kill the old man. Each night at midnight, the narrator stands at the old man's door and shines a light on his face, waiting for the eye to reveal itself. For 7 nights, the narrator does this, waiting patiently until the 8th night, when a heartbeat is heard and the old man knows that something terrible is about to happen. He sits up and the light shines on his eye. The narrator, enraged, charges the old man and smothers him underneath a mattress. The sign of his death is the ceasing of the heartbeat. The narrator cuts the body into pieces and buries the remains underneath the floorboards. Poe most likely found inspiration from real-life events. While working as a reporter for the Alexander Weekly Messenger, he covered a historical case. The first insanity plea in the case of James Wood. No, that's James Woods. We mean James Wood, singular. Wood murdered his daughter and claimed his insanity left him free of guilt. In The Telltale Heart, the narrator is more concerned about sanity than guilt. The entire narrative is a confession of a crime in order to prove sanity. The only way to prove it is to admit guilt. A second influence is the murder of Captain Joseph White by Richard Crowninshield. White was an old man and was beaten to death by Crowninshield in the middle of the night in a psychotic manner, not too unlike the events in The Telltale Heart. Poe was familiar with the story, and its real-life horror may have presented a course of action for its fictitious counterpart.
Do you know the term operant conditioning? It's what a horse has that lets them know a rider might be nervous or hesitant. They read erratic behavior. Not fear, not exactly, but animal criminals learn real quick to avoid that person. That's you, in a nutshell. You're so out of touch with your human side, you can't even listen to anything outside your own head. You really don't hear that? Do have Dr. Ruiz give me a call. And if she says I should do this, I'll do it.
Much like Poe's narrator, Victorine is living inside her own head. Filled with nervousness and paranoia, she sees and hears things no one else is seeing. Upon a visit from her father, the conversation is interrupted by Victorine's hallucinations. She tries to point out the sound of the heartbeat to Roderick. Roderick can also hear it. Given that Roderick has hallucinations himself, we, the audience, can't be sure if this is really happening or not. In a flashback, it's revealed that Victorine had accidentally murdered her partner, the surgeon who was to perform the operation on Verna. In an attempt to save her, Victorine surgically implanted the heart device into her dead partner's chest. The device pumps a heart without life, which is the source of the sound in the room. In Poe's story, the narrator is visited by the police, who have taken notice of the old man's absence. Their investigation turns up nothing, and during small talk, the narrator can't help but hear a heart beating. The noise gets louder and louder until nothing else can be heard. The narrator leaps up and confesses, "Tear up these planks, I admit the deed." Roderick is horrified by the sight of the dead body and Victorine's lack of sanity. She says she needs a better heart, implying that she is willing to give her own. She takes her own life right in front of her father in an incalculable traumatic turn of events.
Maybe I know what's actually happening here. Crazy as it sounds. If all this crazy bullshit is right, then maybe I know how to stop it. You dare me?
Well, that wraps up episode 5, The Telltale Heart, and puts in perspective many of the similarities and differences between the original story by Edgar Allan Poe and the Netflix rendition. Although the episode has some differences compared to Poe's story, it does share many structural similarities and enough Poe references to keep you on your toes. What do you think? Which do you like better? Did you catch any Easter eggs we didn't talk about? Tune in when we break down and compare the next episode with the original text from Poe and point out more Easter eggs. Hint, there are many. Thanks for watching.